The consumption of berries can enhance beneficial signaling in the brain. Plant foods are our primary source of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compounds, but some plant foods may be better than others. As I've explained before, 1 cup of blueberries a day can improve cognition among older adults, as shown in this randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. And the same thing in kids after just a single meal of blueberries, though 2 cups may work better than 1. That single hit of berries may also improve mood. A double-blind, placebo-controlled, crossover study in which kids are asked a series of questions: are you very slightly or not at all, a little, moderately, quite a bit, or extremely interested, excited, strong, etc. Before and after drinking the placebo, no significant change, but 2 hours after consuming about 2 cups of blueberries, their positive mood scores significantly improved. They felt more enthusiastic, alert, inspired, attentive, that kind of thing. That was in young adults, ages 18 through 21, same thing in 7 to 10-year-old children. Some dangerous new mood-enhancing drug or Ritalin? No, blueberries, and just after a single meal. Now blueberries can't do everything. Although a cup of berries certainly appears to improve brain function, no improvement in walking or balance was observed. It turns out that if you can find a sport and a team you like, studies show that there are all sorts of benefits that go beyond the physical and mental benefits of exercise alone. Some of the most significant are psychological benefits, both in the short and long term. Some of those come from the communal experience of being on a team, for instance, learning to trust and depend on others, to accept help, to give help, and to work together towards a common goal. In addition, commitment to a team and doing something fun can also make it easier to establish a regular habit of exercise. School sport participation has also been shown to reduce the risk of suffering from depression for up to 4 years. Meanwhile, your self-esteem and confidence can get a big boost. There are a few reasons for that. One is found in training. Just by working at skills, especially with a good coach, you reinforce a growth mindset within yourself. That's when you say, even if I can't do something today, I can improve myself through practice and achieve it eventually. That mindset is useful in all walks of life. And then there's learning through failure, one of the most transformative, long-term benefits of playing sports. The experience of coming to terms with defeat can build the resilience and self-awareness necessary to manage academic, social, and physical hurdles. How can sleep deprivation cause such immense suffering? Scientists think the answer lies with the accumulation of waste products in the brain. During our waking hours, our cells are busy using up our day's energy sources, which get broken down into various byproducts, including adenosine. As adenosine builds up, it increases the urge to sleep, also known as sleep pressure. In fact, caffeine works by blocking adenosine's receptor pathways. Other waste products also build up in the brain, and if they are not cleared away, they collectively overload the brain and are thought to lead to the many negative symptoms of sleep deprivation. So, what's happening in our brain when we sleep to prevent this? Scientists found something called the glymphatic system, a cleanup mechanism that removes this buildup and is much more active when we're asleep. It works by using cerebrospinal fluid to flush away toxic byproducts that accumulate between cells. Lymphatic vessels, which serve as pathways for immune cells, have recently been discovered in the brain, and they may also play a role in clearing out the brain's daily waste products. While scientists continue exploring the restorative mechanisms behind sleep, we can be sure that slipping into slumber is a necessity if we want to maintain our health and our sanity. Steel and plastic. These two materials are essential to so much of our infrastructure and technology, and they have a complementary set of strengths and weaknesses. Steel is strong and hard, but difficult to shape intricately. While plastic can take on just about any form, it's weak and soft. So wouldn't it be nice if there were one material as strong as the strongest steel and as shapeable as plastic? Well, a lot of scientists and technologists are getting excited about a relatively recent invention called metallic glass with both of those properties, and more. Metallic glasses look shiny and opaque, like metals, and also like metals, they conduct heat and electricity. But they're way stronger than most metals, which means they can withstand a lot of force without getting bent or dented, making ultra-sharp scalpels, and ultra-strong electronics cases, hinges, screws, the list goes on. Metallic glasses also have an incredible ability to store and release elastic energy, which makes them perfect for sports equipment, like tennis rackets, golf clubs, and skis. They're resistant to corrosion, and can be cast into complex shapes with mirror-like surfaces in a single molding step. Despite their strength at room temperature, if you go up a few hundred degrees Celsius, they soften significantly, and can be deformed into any shape you like. Cool them back down, and they regain the strength. There is a lot of water on Mars, and there once was a lot of surface flowing water. You don't see it because most of it is mixed with the soil, which we call regolith on Mars. So the Martian soil can be anywhere from as little as 1% in some very dry desert-like areas to as much as 60% water. So one strategy for getting water when you're on Mars is to break up the regolith, which would take something like a jackhammer because it's very cold, it's very frozen. If you can imagine making a frozen brick or a chunk of ice that's mostly soil and maybe half water and half soil, that's what you would be dealing with. So you need to break this up, put it in an oven. As it heats up, it turns to steam. You run it through a distillation tube and you have pure drinking water that comes out the other end. There is a much easier way to get water on Mars. In this country we have developed industrial dehumidifiers. And they're very simple machines that simply blow the air in a room or a building across a mineral called zeolite. Zeolite is very common on Earth, it's very common on Mars. And zeolite is kind of like a sponge. It absorbs water like crazy. takes the humidity right out of the air. Then you squeeze it and out comes the water. The primary obstacle to good thinking is not a cramped desk or an uninteresting horizon. It is, first and foremost, anxiety. Often the most profound thoughts we need to grapple with have a potentially disturbing character. As these potential implications start to come vaguely into view, our inner censor, motivated by a desire for calm rather than growth, gets alarmed. A vigilant part of the self gets agitated, it distracts us, it makes us feel tired or gives us a strong need to go online. Skillfully, it confuses and muddles our train of thought. It blocks the progress we were starting to make towards ideas that, though important and interesting, also presented marked threats to short-term inner peace. It's in this context that the shower emerges as so helpful to the way our minds work and earns the right to be honored as one of the best places on earth in which to do any kind of serious reflection. Amidst the crashing water and the steam, and with a few minutes of respite before the day starts, the mind is no longer on guard. We're not supposed to be doing much inside our heads. We're mainly occupied with trying to soap our backs and properly rinse our hair. The ideas that have been half-forming at the back of our minds, ideas about what the true purpose of our lives might be and what we should do next, keep up their steady inward pressure, but now there is a lot less to stop them reaching full consciousness. We're not meant to be thinking, and so at last we can think freely and courageously. Language is an essential part of our lives that we often take for granted. With it, we can communicate our thoughts and feelings, lose ourselves in novels, send text messages, and greet friends. It's hard to imagine being unable to turn thoughts into words. But if the delicate web of language networks in your brain became disrupted by stroke, illness, or trauma, you could find yourself truly at a loss for words. This disorder, called aphasia, can impair all aspects of communication. People who have aphasia remain as intelligent as ever. They know what they want to say, but can't always get their words to come out correctly. They may unintentionally use substitutions called paraphasias, switching related words, like saying dog for cat, or words that sound similar, such as house for horse. Sometimes, their words may even be unrecognizable. The behaviors inherent in hibernation, like going 5 weeks without sleep, or dropping to near freezing body temperatures, would be potentially fatal to non-hibernating species like us. To find out how hibernators are able to do this, researchers turned their attention to those animals' genomes. So far, they've discovered that hibernation is controlled by genes that turn off and on in unique patterns throughout the year, fine-tuning the hibernator's physiology and behavior. For example, ground squirrel, bear, and dwarf lemur studies have revealed that these animals are able to turn on the genes that control fat metabolism precisely when they need to use their fat stores as fuel to survive long periods of fasting. And the genes in question are present in all mammals, which means that researchers could study hibernating mammals to see how their unique control of physiology might help humans. Understanding how hibernators deal with reduced blood flow could lead to better treatments for protecting the brain during a stroke. Figuring out how these animals avoid muscle deterioration might improve the lives of bedridden patients. And studying how hibernating animals control their weight with ease could illuminate the relationship between metabolism and weight gain in humans. What is consciousness? Can an artificial machine really think? Does the mind just consist of neurons in the brain, or is there some intangible spark at its core? For many, these have been vital considerations for the future of artificial intelligence. But British computer scientist Alan Turing decided to disregard all these questions in favor of a much simpler one: can a computer talk like a human? This question led to an idea for measuring artificial intelligence that would famously come to be known as the Turing test. In the 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, Turing proposed the following game. A human judge has a text conversation with unseen players and evaluates their responses. To pass the test, a computer must be able to replace one of the players without substantially changing the results. In other words, a computer would be considered intelligent if its conversation couldn't be easily distinguished from a human's. Turing predicted that by the year 2000, machines with 100 megabytes of memory would be able to easily pass his test. But he may have jumped the gun. Even though today's computers have far more memory than that, few have succeeded, and those that have done well focused more on finding clever ways to fool judges than using overwhelming computing power. We all know the scene. Dorothy closes her eyes, and repeats the Good Witch's mantra: no coordinates exist like one's domicile, no coordinates exist like one's domicile, no coordinates exist like one's domicile. Only Dorothy doesn't say that. She says 5 one-syllable words: there's no place like home. Each a word you probably learned in your first year of speaking, each perfectly concise. It's not that 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏 didn't have a thesaurus. It's that in most cases $10 words fail. When it comes to words, bigger isn't always better. $10 words are rendered worthless if they're not understood. That's not to say every piece of literature should be written at a 4th grade reading level, but it is important to know your audience. If you're a novelist, your audience is probably expecting 300 pages of vivid descriptors. At the very least, they're expecting you won't use the same 50 words to fill those pages. But most of us don't have the luxury of a captive audience. We're competing against a whole world of distractions, and we're fighting for space in an attention span that continues to shrink across generations. So get to the point already. The process of writing a book forces you to be curious. And no, contrary to popular belief, curiosity didn't kill the cat. In fact, it made the cat happier. Studies have shown that there is a link between curiosity and dopamine. So that means that people who are curious tend to have lower levels of anxiety, lower levels of depression, and have a better overall psychological well-being. Furthermore, being curious helps expand our knowledge. When we learn new things, explore new ideas and pursue knowledge, we end up having a better understanding of the world around us. When I was doing the research for my book, I, looked at hundreds and hundreds of articles, books, blog posts, everything. And it was great because I ended up absorbing all this information, kind of like a sponge. And now I have a tiny little box back my brain filled with fun facts and tidbits of information that I can pull out, 1. When a conversation gets dull, but 2. To help use as context when I'm learning new things, and so you end up having a self-fulfilling cycle of knowledge where the more you learn, the more you can learn more. How do I learn to enjoy and embrace difficult things and have it be an integrated part of my life? So there are 2 things that really helped me do that. Number 1 is more of a mindset shift and it's more inner work. And number 2 is more of a practical, strategic thing that you do to yourself. Okay, so number 1 is to operate from an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. If you're constantly telling yourself, "Oh, I have to go read books to get smarter. Oh, I have to go read a book now." Obviously you're not gonna have a good time while you're doing it. But if you identify as somebody who enjoys reading books, it's something that you like doing, it's just a part of who you are, then you're way more likely to actually follow through with doing it. This next tip is a little bit more practical and a little less theoretical. And that is to utilize habit bunching. And that is when you pair an already existing habit that you are used to doing with one that you're trying to work on. So for instance, I'm a sucker for a great cup of coffee. I have one in the morning and one in the early afternoon. I really enjoy the taste of coffee and I look forward to it every single time. Do I have an addiction? Yes, but I can leverage this filthy habit of mine into working on another habit. A great one to pair with a coffee addiction is reading. And that's exactly how I started reading more books. Every single morning next to my coffee maker, I placed the book that I wanted to read next to it so that when I made my coffee, I knew to pick up the book and I could only drink the coffee if I was reading the book the entire time I was drinking it. Done. Cell division is an intricate chemical dance that's part individual, part community-driven. And in a neighborhood of 100 trillion cells, sometimes things go wrong. Maybe an individual cell's set of instructions, or DNA, gets a typo, what we call a mutation. Most of the time, the cell senses mistakes and shuts itself down, or the system detects a troublemaker and eliminates it. But, enough mutations can bypass the fail-safes, driving the cell to divide recklessly. That one rogue cell becomes 2, then 4, then 8. At every stage, the incorrect instructions are passed along to the cell's offspring. Weeks, months, or years after that one rogue cell transformed, you might see your doctor about a lump in your breast. Difficulty going to the bathroom could reveal a problem in your intestine, prostate, or bladder. Or, a routine blood test might count too many white cells or elevated liver enzymes. Your doctor delivers the bad news: it's cancer. light up the world, after witnessing the violent rage shown by babies whenever deprived of an item they considered their own. Jean Piaget, a founding father of child psychology, observed something profound about human nature. Our sense of ownership emerges incredibly early. Why are we so clingy? There's a well-established phenomenon in psychology known as the endowment effect. Although feelings of ownership emerge early in life, culture also plays a part. For example, it was recently discovered that Hadza people of northern Tanzania who are isolated from modern culture don't exhibit the endowment effect. That's possibly because they live in an egalitarian society where almost everything is shared. At the other extreme, sometimes our attachment to our things can go too far. Part of the cause of hoarding disorder is an exaggerated sense of responsibility and protectiveness toward one's belongings. That's why people with this condition find it so difficult to throw anything away. Sunscreen as we know it today didn't exist 50,000 years ago. So how did our ancestors cope with this onslaught of UV? The key to survival lay in their own personal sunscreen manufactured beneath the skin, melanin. The type and amount of melanin in your skin determines whether you'll be more or less protected from the sun. This comes down to the skin's response as sunlight strikes it. When it's exposed to UV light, that triggers special light-sensitive receptors called rhodopsin, which stimulate the production of melanin to shield cells from damage. For light-skinned people, that extra melanin darkens their skin and produces a tan. Over the course of generations, humans living at the sun-saturated latitudes in Africa adapted to have a higher melanin production threshold and more eumelanin, giving skin a darker tone. This built-in sun shield helped protect them from melanoma, likely making them evolutionarily fitter and capable of passing this useful trait on to new generations. In the late 17th century, a medical student named Johannes Hofer noticed a strange illness affecting Swiss mercenaries serving abroad. Its symptoms, including fatigue, insomnia, irregular heartbeat, indigestion, and fever were so strong, the soldiers often had to be discharged. As Hofer discovered, the cause was not some physical disturbance, but an intense yearning for their mountain homeland. He dubbed the condition nostalgia, from the Greek nostos for homecoming and algos for pain or longing. At first, nostalgia was considered a particularly Swiss affliction. Some doctors proposed that the constant sound of cowbells in the Alps caused trauma to the eardrums and brain. Commanders even forbade their soldiers from singing traditional Swiss songs for fear that they'd lead to desertion or suicide. But as migration increased worldwide, nostalgia was observed in various groups. It turned out that anyone separated from their native place for a long time was vulnerable to nostalgia. And by the early 20th century, professionals no longer viewed it as a neurological disease, but as a mental condition similar to depression. Reliability and validity are two critical ideas for understanding standardized tests. To understand the difference between them, we can use the metaphor of two broken thermometers. An unreliable thermometer gives you a different reading each time you take your temperature, and the reliable but invalid thermometer is consistently 10 degrees too hot. Validity also depends on accurate interpretations of results. If people say results of a test mean something they don't, that test may have a validity problem. Just as we wouldn't expect a ruler to tell us how much an elephant weighs, or what it had for breakfast, we can't expect standardized tests alone to reliably tell us how smart someone is, how diplomats will handle a tough situation, or how brave a firefighter might turn out to be. So standardized tests may help us learn a little about a lot of people in a short time, but they usually can't tell us a lot about a single person. Many social scientists worry about test scores resulting in sweeping and often negative changes for test takers, sometimes with long-term life consequences. We can't blame the tests, though. It's up to us to use the right tests for the right jobs, and to interpret results appropriately. The benefits of being left-handed are clearest in activities involving an opponent, like combat or competitive sports. For example, about 50% of top hitters in baseball have been left-handed. Why? Think of it as a surprise advantage. Because lefties are a minority to begin with, both right-handed and left-handed competitors will spend most of their time encountering and practicing against righties. So when the two face each other, the left-hander will be better prepared against this right-handed opponent, while the righty will be thrown off. This fighting hypothesis, where an imbalance in the population results in an advantage for left-handed fighters or athletes, is an example of negative frequency-dependent selection. But according to the principles of evolution, groups that have a relative advantage tend to grow until that advantage disappears. If people were only fighting and competing throughout human evolution, natural selection would lead to more lefties being the ones that made it until there were so many of them, that it was no longer a rare asset. So in a purely competitive world, 50% of the population would be left-handed. Ocean currents are driven by a range of sources: the wind, tides, changes in water density, and the rotation of the Earth. The topography of the ocean floor and the shoreline modifies those motions, causing currents to speed up, slow down, or change direction. Ocean currents fall into two main categories: surface currents and deep ocean currents. Surface currents control the motion of the top 10% of the ocean's water, while deep ocean currents mobilize the other 90%. Though they have different causes, surface and deep ocean currents influence each other in an intricate dance that keeps the entire ocean moving. Near the shore, surface currents are driven by both the wind and tides, which draw water back and forth as the water level falls and rises. Meanwhile, in the open ocean, wind is the major force behind surface currents. As wind blows over the ocean, it drags the top layers of water along with it. That moving water pulls on the layers underneath, and those pull on the ones beneath them. As early as 8000 BCE, the earliest Neolithic farmers living in the Fertile Crescent began a legacy of cheese-making almost as old as civilization itself. The rise of agriculture led to domesticated sheep and goats, which ancient farmers harvested for milk. But when left in warm conditions for several hours, that fresh milk began to sour. Its lactic acids caused proteins to coagulate, binding into soft clumps. Upon discovering this strange transformation, the farmers drained the remaining liquid later named whey and found the yellowish globs could be eaten fresh as a soft, spreadable meal. These clumps, or curds, became the building blocks of cheese, which would eventually be aged, pressed, ripened, and whizzed into a diverse cornucopia of dairy delights. The discovery of cheese gave Neolithic people an enormous survival advantage. Milk was rich with essential proteins, fats, and minerals. But it also contained high quantities of lactose, a sugar which is difficult to process for many ancient and modern stomachs. Cheese, however, could provide all of milk's advantages with much less lactose. And since it could be preserved and stockpiled, these essential nutrients could be eaten throughout scarce famines and long winters.